They watched as Earth burned. From distant stars and gilded stations, the galaxy saw the plumes of smoke rise from its cities, watched the lights of its great continents flicker and die. Humanity's homeworld, once a loud, stubborn, blazing ember in the night, grew quiet, but no one came. No rescue fleets, no emergency aid, no offers of help, just silence. The council debated briefly. They expressed regret. Some even sent formal condolences, thin, sterile messages delivered by neutral drones. But no one moved. Not one ship crossed the border into Sol after the first wave of destruction, because they had already decided Earth was a lost cause. And for some, it wasn't even a tragedy. It was a relief. For decades, Earth had been the problem child of the galaxy. Resource-hungry, fierce, independent. Always resisting, always questioning. Humanity didn't fit. They refused to kneel, refused to blend into the chorus of other civilizations. They built their own paths. And when they were warned, they laughed. When they were threatened, they prepared, and when they were betrayed, they remembered. The final war didn't come with a single great enemy. It came as a slow bleed. Trade embargoes, border skirmishes, friendly allies turning cold, treaties broken with polite smiles. Then came the sabotage, communications blackouts, manufacturing lines corrupted, colonial defenses mysteriously failing. The attacks came next, disguised as piracy, blamed on rogue factions. But Earth knew. They always knew. Their allies had left them, not by mistake, by choice. The strongest military on the outer edge of the spiral arm was left to burn, one city at a time, and when the screams echoed across space, the galaxy looked away. They brought this on themselves, the council declared. Too aggressive, too proud. This was inevitable. And so Earth was allowed to fall. The final transmissions were haunting. Flickers of static and flame, a woman in a command bunker whispering into a broken mic, asking if anyone could hear her, a child crying under the collapsed roof of a shelter dome, a pilot sending coordinates for evacuation, then screaming as the sky caved in. Then came silence, and the stars moved on. Records were updated. The Sol system was marked as a red zone, dangerous, unstable, no longer worth visiting. A few archaeologists petitioned to study the ruins. They were denied. Too dangerous, said the council. Better to let the dead rest. And just like that, Earth was erased. But what the galaxy didn't understand, what they never truly believed, is that Earth was not a planet that died quietly because humanity's strength had never been in their weapons. It had always been in their memory, their capacity to carry pain without dropping it, to turn silence into resolve, loss into motion, betrayal into purpose. They had been broken, but not erased. Beneath the ash, under collapsed cities and shattered satellites, something stirred. Earth was not gone. It was waiting for the galaxy to forget, for the final breath of sympathy to expire, for the stars to look away long enough. And then someday, when no one expected it, when the silence had grown too deep and the memory of betrayal too faint, something would rise from the ruins. Not to ask for help, not to explain, but to return the silence. And now, that day is coming. With Earth gone, the galaxy exhaled. Trade resumed. Borders softened. Fleets returned to their homeworlds. The noise, the tension, the weight that Earth had carried into every council chamber and every negotiation table, it vanished like smoke. And, in that silence, something else bloomed. Opportunity. Old rivals formed new pacts. Economies rebounded. Colonies that had once been caught between Earth and the larger powers suddenly found themselves free to grow without interference. Earth had always been the stubborn voice in the room. Now that voice was quiet, and many were happy to pretend it had never been there at all. A few memorials were built. Not on Earth. No one dared to go there. But on neutral worlds. Small stones in quiet gardens. Polite inscriptions about tragedy and the cost of pride. But those faded quickly. overtaken by new monuments, new wars, new alliances. Within 2 generations, Earth was a footnote. In some education systems, it was removed altogether. A species noted for its promise but undone by its own nature. Too volatile to adapt. Too violent to survive. The textbook said it all with practiced neutrality, the way history always does when no one wants to talk about guilt. Only a few remembered the details: retired officers who had served with human forces, smugglers who had once run supplies through Earth's blockade, archivists who had studied ancient Terran literature and knew what that culture had truly endured. But most didn't ask questions, because forgetting is easier, safer. Every once in a while, a story would surface, a quiet whisper that a probe had passed near the Sol system and picked up energy signatures, a flicker of movement, a shadow, but no confirmation. No one followed up. The official stance was clear: Earth is gone. Do not enter Sol space. There's nothing there. And over time, even that warning became ritual, a superstition. Ships avoided the zone out of habit, not fear. Star charts marked it in gray like a bruise that no longer hurt but never quite healed. Pirates stayed away. Explorers joked about the ghosts of Earth and moved on, and the galaxy kept spinning. New powers rose. A mining dynasty expanded into 3 sectors. The council restructured itself, changing charters written when Earth still had a seat. War broke out between 2 distant species. Brief, brutal, but nothing on the scale of the Earth conflict. Even that was considered a lesson in restraint. Nothing like the Terran Wars, they'd say. We've learned from that. They hadn't. They had only covered the scar. Meanwhile, deeper in forgotten data vaults, someone stumbled across an old human saying, "You can bury a body, but not a truth." No one paid much attention. They should have, because beneath Earth's shattered cities, power was returning. Not political power. Not influence. Something colder. Older. A silent kind of preparation. For decades, Earth's silence had been mistaken for death. But it was something else. Something worse. It was patience. And for a species that had been abandoned, erased, and blamed for its own fall, patience wasn't a virtue, it was a strategy. The galaxy had moved on. It had rewritten the past. It had put the Terran chapter behind it. But just because you forget a story doesn't mean it forgets you. It began with static, a low hum, deep within the background noise of deep space communications. It wasn't noticed at first, just another anomaly, buried under layers of normal galactic chatter. But then it repeated. Every 12 hours. Exactly, on a frequency that hadn't been used in over 2 centuries. At first it was dismissed. Noise, cosmic interference. Some thought it was a pulse left over from an old navigation beacon. A few flagged it for archival review, but no one thought it urgent. That is, until someone translated it. The signal was in Terran Standard, the old human language once used for diplomatic exchange. Dead for over 150 years, and yet, here it was, unmistakable. It said only this: Unit 09A online, awaiting further instruction. That's when the alarm started, because the registry number matched something long, buried in Earth's final defense files. A system no one had ever expected to hear from again. A project rumored, then denied, then quietly deleted from public archives altogether. The Leviathan Protocol. The Council scrambled. They tried to trace the source of the signal, but it was layered through a chain of ancient relay buoys, some of them thought to be space debris. The origin led them back, not just to the Sol system, but to the shadow side of Earth itself. It hadn't been a distress call. It was a systems check. Something was online, something buried, and it was waiting. In a forgotten observatory, on a rim-world moon, a retired explorer heard the signal and stopped breathing. He had served during the last days of the Earth War. He knew the code. He knew what it meant. He didn't send a warning. He didn't speak to the media. He simply packed a bag, left a note, and vanished. Not out of fear, out of understanding. The galaxy had thought Earth was dead. But this wasn't the sound of a ghost. It was a heartbeat. And then came the second signal. This one didn't use words. It used images. First, a rotating blueprint of a large orbital platform, human-made. Ancient, but unmistakable in design. Then internal schematics, rows of dormant ships held in stasis, automated systems. No life support. Then, a final screen of data. Power levels rising. Weapons unlocked, launch sequences scheduled, and beneath it all, one message. Phase 1. Initiated. Ghost fleet recovery in progress. Panic spread quickly. The Council reclassified the Sol system from restricted to red-tier quarantine. They urged all ships to avoid the region. The news was buried. No official statement was made, but the rumors spread faster than silence. Across the stars, the old stories came back. The Ghost Fleet, the Silent Arsenal, the Leviathan program. Weapons Earth had built but never used, designed to be the final line of defense should the planet fall. A fleet built without crews, controlled by buried AIs, hidden in vaults beneath oceans and deserts within asteroids and moons. Most had assumed they were myth, but now, someone, or something, was waking them up. And still, no one knew why. Earth hadn't spoken, no message, no demands. Just old machines slowly, methodically returning to life, not all at once. Not fast, but enough. Enough to remind the stars that silence is not always peace. Sometimes it's preparation. In an emergency meeting, the Council voted to send a recon probe. It entered the Sol system with stealth drives engaged, cameras active. It lasted 13 minutes. What came back was grainy, blurred, and brief. But one frame was clear. Earth, spinning slowly in the dark, and in low orbit. 3 objects, massive, angular, silent, and moving. The feed cut out after that. The probe never returned. But the last image it sent burned into every screen across the Council's command hub. A hull, matte black, shaped like a blade with a glowing line of text etched along its side. Unit 09A, Vengeance awaiting confirmation. Beneath the skin of a dead world, machines were waking, not in a hurry, not in panic, but with the precision of something that had been told to wait, and had done exactly that, for over 200 years. Across Earth's shattered surface, beneath mountain ranges, ice shelves, and dry ocean beds, massive vaults began to hum with power. These weren't ordinary bunkers. They weren't shelters or silos. They were cradles. Each one contained parts of something larger, components of machines too large to ever move unnoticed, fragments of ships that had never been assembled, kept in stasis, waiting for a signal that had finally come. There were no human voices guiding the process. There were no engineers, no command centers. Only the code, written by hands long gone, uploaded into the deepest layers of the planet's digital nervous system. In the event of extinction, initiate Leviathan protocol. And Leviathan had listened. Deep in the Arctic Circle, a frozen lake cracked and split open, revealing an ancient door. Metal groaned beneath the pressure of centuries. Steam hissed out as internal heat spread through forgotten corridors. Lights flickered on, revealing a vast chamber lined with armored plating. Inside, a ship began to breathe. Not literally, but something close. Its systems stirred like muscle under skin. Its core glowed like a pulse. Not a vessel built for exploration or colonization. No, this was something else. A ship designed for response. Its hull bore no name, just a serial number and one line, etched deep into the alloy. We were not allowed to fall. You were not allowed to forget. This was not the only one. On the ocean floor near the Mariana Trench, a silo opened like a metal flower. Inside, a wing of drones detached from their charging cradles and began assembling larger components: armor, engines, weapons platforms the size of buildings, and above it all, orbiting Earth like silent sentinels, 3 old satellites reactivated. They weren't communication devices. They were keys. Their signal triangulated across the surface, unlocking vault after vault in sequence, each one designed for a different phase of activation, not all at once. Leviathan wasn't built to lash out blindly. It was built to prepare, to escalate carefully, to study the galaxy's response. And so, while the Council argued, while nervous, admirals issued orders to prepare contingency fleets. Earth's arsenal grew in silence, and the galaxy still hadn't seen the worst of it. Because this wasn't just a military resurrection. It was a memory system. Every data core that came online didn't just load weapons protocols or targeting systems, they loaded history, video logs, final transmissions, holographic records of Earth's collapse, the cries for help, the unanswered distress calls, the moment allies chose to look the other way. The Leviathan protocol had one purpose: to return silence with silence, not through destruction, but through reminder. Its creators had known they might not survive, but they made sure the galaxy would not forget them. Not entirely, not forever. And now that the process had begun, nothing could stop it. Not negotiations, not apologies. Because the Ghost Fleet, as it would come to be known, wasn't just a fleet of ships, it was a message. Each vessel was both weapon and witness, a story in steel, and in orbit, the first of them powered up completely. It drifted in, the dark, turning slowly to face the stars. No lights, no engines flaring. And yet, it moved, directed by something deeper than software. Something that remembered. Something that had waited. It didn't fire. It didn't speak. It simply broadcast, one line in every language known to the galaxy. Phase 2, memory deployment imminent. And then, silence. Again. But this silence was no longer comforting. It was the kind of silence that makes admirals sweat, the kind that makes diplomats forget their words, the kind that reminds the stars what they did, and what's now coming. Back for them, Earth was dead, but Earth's memory was very much alive. It started with a flicker, a single world on the edge of Council space, small, old, and largely unimportant. Neora 4, known mostly for its trade docks and quiet markets. Once, long ago, it had been a human ally. But in Earth's final years, Neora had made a choice. They turned their backs. They had hosted Council ships that blockaded Sol. They had silenced their diplomats when the cries from Earth grew desperate. They had signed the treaties, taken the credits, and never looked back. Now, Earth remembered them. The warning came in the form of silence. Every off-world communication relay from Neora 4 stopped working at once. Power grids hummed but did not fail. Satellites continued to orbit, but none responded to hails. The planet spun, calm and untouched, beneath the twin light of its suns. But no one could reach it. The first rescue ship was sent in haste. It reported, normal atmosphere, no radiation spikes, no signs of impact. But as it descended, its feed cut out, mid-sentence. The crew was never heard from again. Then the second ship tried. Same result. It wasn't a blockade. It wasn't a weapon. It was absence. Like something had brushed a hand across the planet and removed what it wanted, quietly, efficiently, completely. 3 days later, a transmission was received across the galaxy. It wasn't a video. It wasn't even a voice. It was a series of images, sent in a slow, steady rhythm. An empty plaza. A schoolroom, desks untouched. A meal, still warm on a kitchen table. Clothing laid out mid-fold on a bed. Not a disaster, not destruction, just absence. At the bottom of each image was a single phrase. We heard your silence, now hear ours. Panic hit like fire in dry brush. Systems that had once laughed at the mention of Earth now sealed their borders. Fleets were mobilized. Military AIs were rebooted. The Council met behind locked doors, their voices rising, their fear barely hidden. Because Neora 4 was not just gone. It had been selected, a reminder, a memory delivered in quiet finality. And then came the Ghost Fleet, not with grand arrivals or massive waves. One ship at a time, appearing on the edges of long-forgotten systems, hovering silently above key planets. No lights, no threats, just presence. Sometimes they stayed for hours, sometimes days. When they left, they didn't leave ruin. They left silence. A world of smugglers went dark after 7 hours of observation. Corporate colony stripped of its security systems. Its citizens left unharmed, but its servers completely wiped. Every record of its dealings during the Earth embargo erased. No shot fired. No bodies found. Only messages. Variations of the same theme. This is not revenge, this is memory. Across the stars, a term began to spread. Earth's revenge. Not as a military campaign, not as a crusade, but as something deeper. A reckoning carried out with patience, not fury. A vengeance shaped not by hate, but by remembrance. And that was what terrified them most, because hate can be negotiated with. Hate can be feared, managed, manipulated. But memory, that can't be stopped. It can only be answered. The council scrambled to prepare a statement, a peace offer, a way to reach out, to ask for terms. But there were no terms. There was no contact. Only the quiet spread of ships that never spoke, only watched. Systems with buried guilt began to destroy old records. Leaders made public declarations offering sympathy, even regret. But it wasn't enough. Because the Ghost Fleet didn't want apologies. It wasn't built to forgive. It was built to make sure no one ever forgot. The first strike wasn't measured by death. It was measured by silence, and in that silence, the galaxy finally began to hear what Earth had been trying to say all along. You abandoned us. And now, the stars were learning what that choice cost. By the time the third system went quiet, fear had already spread. Not war, not chaos, not bombs falling or fleets clashing in orbit. Just fear. The kind that creeps in quietly. The kind that doesn't need sirens or alarms to be heard. Because everyone now understood the pattern. The Ghost Fleet wasn't targeting worlds at random, it was choosing them. Each system visited had some tie to Earth's final days. A vote cast against intervention, a resource deal signed during the blockade. A shipment of weapons routed to Council forces instead of Earth's defense grid. Old sins. Things buried beneath layers of new treaties and polished speeches. But the Ghost Fleet hadn't forgotten. And it wasn't erasing cities or turning planets into ash. It was erasing comfort, erasing the idea that silence had no cost. The galaxy wasn't used to this kind of warfare. Their fleets were trained for battles of attrition, of energy weapons, and orbital sieges. But this wasn't a battle. It was a reminder, one that came without warning and left without fire. The most advanced defense systems couldn't lock onto the ghost ships. They didn't emit standard power signatures. Their hulls reflected scans in all directions. They moved like shadows across starlight, not as fleets in formation but as memories drifting with purpose. And when they were gone, they left behind nothing but stillness. Not even debris. Only the messages. Short. Simple. Brutal. You heard our screams. You did nothing. This is what forgetting looks like. We remember. The Council's public line was one of caution, unexplained events, rogue AI interference, ancient tech activating outside of protocol. But no one believed it, because the people remembered too. They remembered the tension when Earth was still on the Council floor. They remembered the broadcasts that went unanswered. They remembered how fast the news had changed, how easily Earth was labeled unstable, dangerous, unworthy of aid. Now those memories clawed their way back up. Citizens demanded answers. Academics uncovered old documents that had been sealed for generations. Whistleblowers came forward. Retired officers, former diplomats, mercenaries paid to smuggle fuel into Sol space and then ordered to leave it behind. Some confessed on public channels. Others didn't survive long enough to try. A wave of quiet guilt spread through the heart of the galaxy. And, still the Ghost Fleet said nothing. It just kept moving. One ship, one system, one memory at a time. Governments panicked. Whole planets shut down incoming communications to avoid being targeted. Colonies with even the slightest link to Earth's fall began falsifying their historical archives. But that didn't help, because the Ghost Fleet wasn't searching for evidence. It already had all the proof it needed. And the terrifying truth? Didn't seem to be looking for revenge. If it had been, there would be bodies, burned cities, wrecked planets. Instead, it left worlds untouched on the surface, but hollowed underneath. Fear turned inward. Families questioned their ancestors, roles in the past. Leaders were accused of lies, of silence, of complicity. And when one council member tried to stand up during a broadcast and claim that Earth had caused its own fall, every screen in the galaxy blinked black. And a message played. Not a threat, not a demand, just a voice. Human. Weary. I called for help. No one came. The message played once, then silence. Again, and again, for one full minute, until even the most skeptical among them could feel it. Not rage, but remembrance. And they began to understand. The Ghost Fleet wasn't hunting the galaxy. It was haunting. Because Earth hadn't come back to fight, it had come back to show. And some truths, once shown, can never be unseen. The Council had no more excuses. The fear that had crept through back rooms and whispered corridors now stood at the center of every chamber. The people were watching. Entire star systems were calling for truth, for action, for an end to the silence. So, the Council did what it always did when it lost control. It pleaded, not to the public, to the Ghost Fleet. They sent out a message across all frequencies, military, civilian, even obsolete channels last used during the Earth Wars. It wasn't an order, it wasn't a statement, it was a request, a single ship, a diplomatic envoy, no weapons, just a crew of speakers, historians, and one surviving Earth War veteran, who hadn't spoken publicly in 50 years. They flew toward Sol, no escort. No defenses, just voices asking to be heard. The ship made it past the boundary of the dead zone, past the orbital wreckage still floating in distant rings. No resistance, no scans, no warning. And then the fleet appeared, not in aggression, in silence. One ship after another, unfolding from the void like ink drifting in water. They didn't aim weapons. They didn't surround the envoy. They simply watched. The envoy sent its message. We were wrong. We forgot. We erased you, but now we see. If you can hear this, please let us speak. There was no response. Not for hours. Not for a day. But just as the crew prepared to leave, their screens came alive. It wasn't an image. It wasn't even a live feed. It was a memory, a video from Earth's final days. Council diplomats standing on Earth's surface, promising aid, then departing, never to return. The image changed. Human soldiers defending outposts with nothing but scrap and fire. Colonists sending final messages to empty channels. Children sitting in the dark, holding each other, waiting for someone who never came. Then came the last clip, a council official on record, speaking to a committee. We cannot afford to sacrifice resources for a world that cannot stabilize itself. Earth is beyond saving. That was the last thing the crew saw before every screen went black, and then a single message blinked in white. You left. No attack followed. No signal. The Ghost Fleet turned slowly and began to move again, past Sol, past the envoy, past the memory of Earth. But the message stayed, and the crew understood. There would be no talks, no terms, no apology accepted, because Earth had never wanted an apology. It had wanted presence. It had wanted someone to come, and no one had. Now all that was left was memory, and the Ghost Fleet would carry that memory to every system that helped bury the truth. The envoy returned, empty-handed, heavy-hearted. They had seen the face of humanity's silence, and they knew no law, no treaty, no gesture would stop what was coming, not because Earth hated, but because Earth remembered, and the stars would remember too, one world at a time. The Ghost Fleet reached the edge of the galactic core. Hundreds of ships, dark as space itself, drifting silently through the void. No formation, no signal, just presence. The quiet weight of something that had waited too long, carried too much and asked for nothing in return. The attacks had stopped, but the fear remained. By now, the Council no longer tried to cover anything up. Entire databases had been reopened. The true history of Earth, its rise, its betrayal, its death, was no longer hidden. Not in libraries, not in classrooms. The people had demanded it, because the Ghost Fleet had forced it. Across the galaxy, memorials were built, not to the dead, but to the forgotten. Stones etched with names of human cities no one had spoken of in 200 years. Broadcast loops of final messages, now played in public squares. Whole planets holding remembrance days, for a species they once ignored. But Earth wasn't asking for grief, it was asking for truth. And truth had finally taken root. Still, no one knew what the Ghost Fleet wanted now. It had passed by systems without firing. It had hovered over colonies for days, leaving only silence. It had shown memories. It had taken nothing but peace. And yet, its presence still felt like a sword hanging overhead. Until, one day, without warning, the fleet stopped moving. Right on the galactic boundary, where the stars grow thin, where space itself begins to fade into deep black. There it waited. And then, finally, it spoke. Not through one ship, not on one frequency, but across every device, every channel, every screen in the galaxy. A voice, human, measured, cold, tired, and unmistakably clear. You didn't come. You watched us fall. You said it was not your war, not your loss. You called it peace. Then came silence. Not cut off, not broken, just paused, as if the voice wanted the galaxy to sit with the truth. And then it returned. We built no empire. We asked for no thrones. We only asked to be remembered. Another pause, deeper this time, heavier. Then the voice softened. We are not your enemy. We are what your silence created. The final image appeared. On every screen, not Earth in flames, not ships in orbit, just one frame. A human child standing in the rubble of a ruined street, staring up at the sky. No fear. No hope. Just the look of someone who waited, and knew no one was coming. Beneath that image were 4 final words. This is your memory. And then, the fleet vanished. Not in light. Not in fire. They simply left. Gone beyond the edge of the mapped stars. Beyond where signals could follow. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Done. Their mission wasn't conquest. It never had been. It was closure. The final act of a civilization that had been erased. Not with bombs or armies, but with neglect. And now, the stars would never forget again. In the years that followed, something changed. History was rewritten, not to glorify Earth, but to acknowledge it, to tell the truth of what had been lost. Children learned the names of Terran scientists, poets, and explorers. Council sessions began with a moment of silence for the systems that had once ignored their cries. And every year, across 100 worlds, on the date Earth's final signal went unanswered, people stood still, not in guilt, but in respect. Because Earth had not returned to destroy, it had returned to remind that silence has a price, that memory can rise again, and that the smallest, most stubborn voices in the galaxy might be the ones that echo the longest. In time, new civilizations would rise, new threats would come, but the stars would carry this truth in their bones, never again forgotten, never again ignored. Earth had fallen, But Earth's voice had risen, and that voice now lived in every system that once chose silence. Because in the end, they thought no one would come. But Earth did.